Hi, I'm Zoe Starr, and thank you for watching Paranormal Extraction. Today's show, we have Darrell Denton on, and the episode, we're going to have 2 episodes, one again next week. Today is called Monster in the Woods. Can you imagine while you're like on a fishing trip or deer hunting, and all of a sudden you witness this? That is what we're going to be speaking about today. But let me tell you a little bit what's really cool about Darrell. Okay, besides being an absolutely fantastic person, did you know that he was an elected alderman, commissioner, and mayor of Robertson County, Tennessee for 24 years? He also does radio, and he does a lot of podcasts. He's also partners with world-known researchers on Bigfoot. Now, I know a lot of you guys are going to be watching this because, of course, he has a fantastic Facebook page. And I just want to say thank you so much for the prayers. I know I don't look like I'm hurt. They've helped out a lot. I really appreciate it, but I have nerve damage to my neck. So I'm doing the best I can do today, and we're going to go over and we are going to talk to my best bud, Darrell.
You look great, Joey.
Hey, Darrell, thank you so much for saying that. I just want to say I'm not doing great. You're doing great. And I am just so excited about having you on my show today. And we spoke for, quite some time about your journey with, this creature. We're going to just say it's Bigfoot because it actually really is. But today is your first encounter on Monster in the Woods. So first of all, where can they find you on Facebook? Because you have a fantastic page that, I'm involved in. And for me, it's the only credible page out there. And so if anyone really wants to know about Bigfoot, where do they go on Facebook?
Well, thanks, Zoe. I appreciate you saying that. I'm honored to have you and honored to be on your show. You can go to Bigfoot Believers and Other Creatures and find me and all my great administrators, members. We don't allow any criticism. That's what makes us grow every day, I think, because you can tell your encounters and not have to worry about being criticized.
Yeah, and you're pretty stringent on who can say what or what's going on, and you don't allow a lot of these stupid, CGIs on there, coming on there showing these stupid Bigfoot clips that aren't real, and you guys are the real thing. And you don't put up with anyone's crap.
Well, I'm surrounded by a great cast, so it's not all me. I have some tremendous admins and moderators and experts, and they do a fantastic job of stopping that from happening. So couldn't do it without them. So even though it's my group, it's all our group. So we've grown it together, and we continue to grow, and I appreciate all the great members we have, and hope it continues doing that. I'm so glad you're there because you and I become such close friends.
Yeah, I know, thank God. And I'm so glad things are going so well in your life, and that we actually did sit down and talk about this thing. And I said, Darrell, oh my God, there's no way we can do all this in one episode, and I've never done 2 episodes, but with everything we talked about, we had to have you on again, which is the next episode is going to be seeing orbs and then being followed home and being terrorized by a rogue Bigfoot. That's next week. So why don't you start, just from the beginning and tell everyone, your story about this monster in the woods.
Okay. First of all, let me let everybody know I'm no expert. There is no expert. I only talk about my own experiences, what I've witnessed and lived through. So these are my experiences. Other things may exist. Some people may agree or disagree. That's fine. You have that option to do so. But my first experience was on November the 6th, 1992. And I was on my grandfather's farm in Chetham County, Tennessee. And he had lived there most of his life, just a few miles away his whole entire life. And he was actually 92 years old at that time. And me and three of my friends, Cody, Scott, and Jason, went up there previously for 5 or 6 years. And we would go up there opening day, opening week of muzzleloader, which is black powder hunting that opens the week before regular gun season. Because you have a little better chance to get a trophy deer before the season or late in the season. So that's why we went up there. And I'd hunted in these woods all my life, but not this far in. And we had pulled our camper up, which I pulled with my truck, and they followed me with a truck and a trailer. We all had 4-wheelers, and we set camp up at his barn, and we got ready for everything the next day, which this was the day before the season opened, and everybody headed out to the direction of where they were going to hunt. And we had some built stands and some stands we call deer climbing stands we carried on our back, and we would either hunt the built stands or the climbing stands. And I decided to go a different area, which was very deep in the woods. My grandfather had told me on his back porch, if I was you, I would go see that third hill, and that was a good 45-minute to an hour walk, but he said, that's deep in. He said, there's probably nobody been in there in years, and if you go there, you probably have a better chance for a trophy deer, which a trophy deer is one with a big rack or antlers. It's a male deer only hunt that muzzleloader week. And so I headed out that day and carried my stand, and you kind of go through my grandfather's backyard through a gate, and then the gate shuts, and you go across about a 200 foot wide, 200 yards, yard sage grass field into a wood line where it had a barbed wire fence that surrounded a certain area in there that pretty much where his cattle were at, where they couldn't get out. And I crossed that fence and you had to cross 2 hollows, and when I say steep, they're like 45-degree angle, a couple of them are. Wow. And so I made over the first 2, I crossed over the third one and went down, and I found the creek he was talking about, where part of an old grist mill was there that had been there for hundreds of years, but it had fallen in. I got down there and did some scouting and found a tree and climbed the tree and cut a few limbs off and got my tree stand mounted to the tree ready for the next day, and crossed the creek and found some areas that looked real good in my viewing sight. There was kind of a clearing in the woods there, and I had what's called a drag rag you put on your shoe or your boot, and you drag it in the woods. It covers up your scent, and it also has a scent on it called doe and estrus, which kind of attracts the male deer. And I hung that in a tree limb across the creek straight ahead of me, and I could jump up to that limb and tie it on, and then it went up, and that kind of filtrates kind of an odor down through that hollow, covers up my scent, and hopefully the tracks. So that was what I'd done the first day. Then I headed back to my grandfather's place and went to the camper where my friends were at, and I told him, I said, make sure you get me up early in the morning so I can make that walk. And he always got up 4:30 or 5 because he went to milk his cows.
Sure.
And go ahead. I'm sorry, Zoe.
No, I said, yeah. I was just saying, sure.
Okay. So the next morning, he came down and knocked on the side of the camper, and my grandfather never called me by my name. He always called me Boy. And he said, Boy, time to get up. So I pretty much headed out and went back behind his house through the gate, crossed that about 200-yard wide sage field, and got to the barbed wire fence and climbed over it and went straight up this real steep hill. And I'd gotten probably about halfway up, and I heard something to the left of me. It sounded like somebody walking, and kind of startled me a little bit. I shined my flashlight in the area, didn't see anything, and I started thinking, was there another hunter in here? I know it's none of my friends because I know the area they're in.
Yeah.
This is a very large area that we hunted in, so I knew none of us were going to be close to each other. We all knew what direction to be in, because that way nobody would get shot or be encroaching in somebody else's hunting area. So climbed over that ridge and down the second one. There's a little barbed wire fence I stepped across that had been used for years, and finally, by the time I'd gotten over the third ridge, going down toward the creek, I heard the footsteps again, and they were on top of the hill that I just crossed, kind of to my left, and it was walking. And I stopped again and shined my light and didn't see anything. I walked a little further and I heard it again.
Wow.
When I would walk, it would stop, and kind of concerned me a little bit because I couldn't believe a hunter would be in here. My grandfather would never like that. And I knew it wasn't one of my friends, so I really didn't know what it was. So I just continued on down till I found the edge of the creek. I followed it all the way around till I came to my tree stand, because I wasn't familiar with this particular area. I hunted there all my life, but not this steep end. And I got to my stand, and I kind of hurried up and got my climbing stand on my boots and the climber, and turned my stand around and got to the top of the tree. And got set up, and you kind of lean back, which causes the bar on it to dig into the tree where it won't slip. And I have a harness around me that I tie around the tree behind me, a limb. And I got all my gear set up, my little fanny pack that had my reloads and my powder horn in it, and then my binoculars I had hung up on to the left, along with a little bag I had my lunch in for that day, because I was planning on staying there a good while. And got set up, and it was still dark, and wasn't hearing anything else, but it was real quiet for a while. And then right at daylight, it wasn't completely daylight, but good enough where you could see, I started hearing the regular critters, as we call them, in the woods, squirrels and stuff running around in the leaves, and watched a few of them. And it was a real foggy morning. As I looked down across the creek into that clearing close to where my drag rag was hanging in that tree, the fog was breaking up, and I could see the other side, but not real clear. But as the morning went on a little bit, it was somewhere before 8 o'clock in the morning. I looked to the left, and there was this huge green cane thicket, and cane is kind of like a bamboo-looking stuff that grows on the river and creek banks in the area that I live in. And it was real tall, 12 to 15 foot tall, real thick. It's hard to get through because it grows real close. And I noticed 3 deer come out of the left of me somewhere in the cane area, and there was a little ravine between there and the cane, and 3 female deer called doe came out, and they walked across the creek up the bank. And on the other side of the creek, on top of the bank, was a game trail that went right by the area I'd hung that drag rag. There's a clearing right there in the woods, and it's kind of a flat area before it goes up another ridge. And they were walking around like deer do. And the day before, I'd found some scrapes and some rubs, which is what a buck deer does when it's marking its territory and rubbing its antlers on trees or tree limbs, and wears the bark off. And they were just wandering around like deer do. They were kind of mulling around and eating acorns. That year had a lot of acorns, and deer love acorns, and these are white-tailed deer. And I watched them walk around for probably a good 30 minutes, and they were just acting normal. And there was a big female doe, and then there was a smaller one to the right, and then another one to the left, kind of behind her. And they were all just facing to my left, and they were just acting normal. And all of a sudden, the lead deer, the one in front, the bigger one, which was probably the mother of those 2, I noticed her ears went up, and she was facing, looking toward that cane thicket, down toward a little further away from me. And I noticed the other 2 deer done that, and all 3 of them just froze. They weren't moving. They were looking right at that area. And then I noticed the lead deer, the female, stick her head up like she was smelling, which deer do. And then about that time, she made a real loud blowing noise, which sounds like you're almost blowing your nose or something. It's loud.
Wow.
And it's loud enough that you can hear it from a good distance. And that's usually a sign of a threat or something. And I didn't know exactly what was causing that. I was thinking, well, here comes a buck deer. There's a big one about to come out of this thicket over here somewhere. Then I noticed she brought her right front foot up and she raised it 2 or 3 times and kind of stomped on the ground like she was trying to make something move. And then all of a sudden, all 3 of them turned and went to the right, back across in front of me, and they were running as fast as they could run, like something had shot at them, or which I've seen them do before, or something had spooked them in the woods, and they were just running as fast as they could. They run back across in front of me down that game trail as fast as they could, and I watched them run off in the distance, and I'm thinking, well, here comes a big buck out of this thicket somewhere over here.
Right.
And then about that time, it was maybe 4 or 5 minutes after that, I started seeing this cane thicket. You could see it moving in the middle. And it takes something pretty heavy to move that cane like that because it's so thick in there. But it was moving the center of the cane all the way to the edge. There was a large amount of it moving. And I'm thinking, well, this must be a massive deer. And I watched it to the edge of it as far as I could see it. I couldn't actually see that very edge because it was out of my distance around a little bend. But this thing stepped out and I was looking and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I said, what is this? I was like just in shock. And this thing stepped out and made one step and leaped completely across the creek. One step and landed on that game trail on the other side. And the creek in that area is about 10 foot wide, probably maybe 12 in some parts, and it gets a lot wider on the upper end and the lower end. But he just jumped across it and it walked straight down in front of me. And by this time, I was just absolutely in shock.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, I don't know anything about deer hunting. That's amazing. I mean, everything you spoke about that, so now I know about it. But so I mean, obviously, I mean, these deer knew this thing was in there, and you're just sitting there, and then all of a sudden you see this thing. What did it look like? I mean, to freak you out?
Well, it was nothing like I'd ever seen because, you kind of grow up to believe there's not a such thing as monsters in the woods, and that's what it was. This thing was about 8 foot tall. It was just the meanest looking thing I've ever seen. Its face was a human kind of face. The nose was wider than ours, but it had more of a human type head. It wasn't like the patty type you've seen. Its mouth was kind of contortion to the right side as I was facing it. And by this time, when it had walked almost straight in front of me, it turned and looked right at me.
Oh my God.
It was just staring at me. And by this time, I was like, just to be honest with you, I didn't know I had fear in me like that. But it's scary. I'm not scared of much of anything in the woods, but this thing was just evil looking, and it wasn't happy that I was there. And then it showed me its teeth, and when it showed me its teeth is when it really hit me. I thought, well, this thing, and I'm up 25 foot in a tree.
Well, thank God. I mean, you're up in the tree, though, right? I mean, you're feeling somewhat safe.
I mean, I don't know what safe felt at that particular time, but I had this, there's like a bar that pulls up on my tree stand, and it comes up right under my neck, right at the very top of under my shoulders, and it's like a camo cover that pulls down, and that was draped all over me, all the way down to my boots, and it couldn't see me, and I had blackout under my eyes, which I always put because it helps camouflage you a little more and keeps the sun glare if you have one. And this thing was just staring at me with gritting its teeth like it was just mad at me. It had an evil look like it wanted to get me. And I was just frozen. I couldn't hardly even breathe. I had my hand on my gun, which was laying on this bar in front of me. And I was thinking, well, if I shoot this thing, I've only got one shot with this 50 caliber slug. And I don't believe what I've got will take this thing down.
Okay, so Darrell, I'm a little confused here. Only because, okay, so this thing rips this tree down. Let's just back up a little bit, okay? And,
well, rip the tree limb out.
Okay, right, the limb out. And then where'd it go?
It walked back. When it ripped the tree limb out, it was straight ahead of me. And then it just turned around and walked back where it was, maybe 3 or 4 steps, and started staring at me again. And my point with the watch, I always push the button on the stopwatch when I see something coming, like a buck. That way we would have the same time frame to be there the next day. And I didn't know that it was a monster, but I pushed my stopwatch at 8:23 in the morning. And I pushed it in as the story progressed. Where do you want me to start at you want me to start on the stopwatch, or where do you want me to start at?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I want you to just continue. I mean, okay, so you're using the stopwatch, okay? And
yeah, it was just a reference of the point of the time it came out.
Okay. Okay, so it took off before.
Well, no, it didn't leave. It was still standing there.
Oh
I just
God.
pushed but it was still standing there. After it let out this scream that was unbelievable. I still never heard a scream like that of all the recordings I've heard, and it was so loud that it echoed all down that hollow. And it just sat there for a minute looking at me, and by this time, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to fire or to just, I knew I couldn't climb down the tree because it takes a good 15 minutes with a climber to get down up that high. And I decided I lowered the bar in front of me that covered underneath my neck here down. And I had my gun in my hand, and I just jumped about 25 foot out of that tree. And
oh my God.
It was walking off, and it had already walked off, and it stopped and turned and looked back at me one time as it was walking off, and I watched it go into the woods and disappear through the hardwoods, and then I just lowered the bar, and I jumped out of the tree, and I hit leaves. I was on an angle. I slid all the way into the creek with my gun above my head, and I jumped up out of the creek and took off running as fast as I could up on top of the game trail on the side I'd come in on, and I went up a little ravine and ran as fast as I could up that steep hill and got to the top, looking back the whole way, making sure it wasn't following me. And by the time I crossed the first hill and I started down the second one, I was just about halfway up, probably on the second hollow, and I looked back and it was standing on top of the hill I'd come down off of.
No way.
Looking at me. I don't know if it was this.
Oh my God.
I don't know if it was the same one or another one, but it looked like the same one. And that gave me more adrenaline to run faster, so I ran up the top of that hill and crossed down it. And by the time I made it to the top of the third hill, I looked back and didn't see it. And as I was running down the third hill, there was that barbed wire fence I had to cross to get to the safety grass field. And I wasn't going to stop and climb over it, so I jumped it running as fast as I could, and it caught the bottom of my pants leg and ripped it all the way up to my knee and cut a huge gash in my leg. I didn't even know I had. I got to the sage field and crossed the sage field looking back, and then I went through the gate and got to the gate, went through it, locked the gate, looking back, didn't see it, and then I ran onto my grandfather's porch, and he had a big old farmhouse with an overhang on his back porch, and I went through that back door and shut the door, and I actually locked the old screen door in between it with a little hook, and then locked the door when I shut it and looked out the window in the glass, didn't see it anywhere. And then I ran to the right into the living area where my grandfather was at. And he had this big pot-bellied stove that sat between the corner and the middle of the room. And I just went over and sat on the floor behind it, and I was trying to get my breath. I was just so out of wind I could hardly talk or breathe. And I was sitting there, and my grandfather was sitting over to the left of me, and he was in his rocking chair, and he said, "Boy, what's wrong with you?" And I couldn't even talk. I was trying to get my breath, and I got up and I looked out the side window and back out the back door and still didn't see it. So I came back down and sat down again. And he said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." And I said, I still at that point couldn't talk. I was so out of breath. But
yeah.
I said, "Yeah, I seen a monster in the woods." And he said, "A monster?" And I said, "Yeah, I've never seen anything like that." And it was like a huge monster that it didn't want me there, and it was mad at me for being there. He said, "Well, what did it look like?" And I told him, and he goes, "Oh, you seen the woodburger?" And I said, "The woodburger?" I said, "What is a woodburger?" And he said, "Oh, they've been around here all my life." And he was 92 years old at that time, but he was in unbelievable health. And just farmed like always. And I said, "What is a woodburger?" And he said, "Well, they've been around here all my life. I've seen 4 of them in my lifetime. And I'll be in the field working, and I'll look up and want to be standing at the fence looking at me, or I'll see one off in the distance walking." Or he said, "They don't hurt you. They're real territorial." He said, "I didn't think about one being there, but I can understand why they would be, because nobody ever goes back in that area." And he said, "I never told you about them because I knew when you were growing up, all the times you hunted here and camped out with your friends, that you wouldn't have done that if I'd have told you about them. So that's why I didn't mention them." And I said, "Well, I've never seen or heard of anything like this." And I said, "I guess it's one of those Bigfoot creatures." And he said, "Well, yeah, but we call it the woodburger." And all the old people, he related to all the old people of his age, or his parents and ancestors had known of them. They lived around there forever. And he said in the wintertime, they come to my chicken house, which he had a chicken house out to the left of his back porch that he and his family had made years ago. It was made out of actual tree logs that had been hoed out and cut out. And had a lot of chickens in there, and he said they'll come to the hen house in the winter when they get hungry and can't find anything to eat, and they'll take 2 or 3 chickens, and they'll leave a little stack of rocks and sticks like they're paying for it.
Wow.
I said, "Really?" And I said, "Why? You never told me about this stuff. I would have never wanted back in there." And he said, "Well, like I told you, I didn't want you to be afraid of the woods." And that was pretty much it. I was really pretty tore up the rest
God.
of the day. And,
I mean,
you know, it was just like nothing I'd ever thought existed. So,
wow.
you know, I thought about Bigfoot, and I won't say I didn't believe in them, but I didn't think they were in my area. I thought they were all out west, like Oregon or Washington, California, Canada, British Columbia, that area, if they were around. So that's what I'd always heard. Except for the Bayou Creek Monster, which I thought was just a movie. I didn't really take it serious, but I'd seen reruns of it when I was growing up. But anyway, my friends came back 2 or 3 hours later, and I still hadn't calmed down. I was just a nervous wreck. And I went out to meet them, and one of them had a deer hanging in the tree out next to the barn, and he was skinning it out.
I know.
I started talking to them, and Scott walked up to me as I was coming out there, and Jason and Cody were skinning it, and I said, "Guys, we've been hunting here 5 or 6 years. Have y'all ever seen anything in the woods up here?" And they looked at me real funny, and "Like what?" And I said, "Like a Bigfoot type creature." They just looked at me and started laughing. They said, "You had too much to drink last night." They all called me Big Dude. I said, "No, I didn't drink anything last night." And they said, "No, we ain't never seen anything like that." And I just pretty much let it go from there and kind of kept it as a secret. To me, for a long time, I really only discussed it with Martin Groves, my best friend, still is. And, you know, he was on the sheriff's department where I was in the little city I was mayor at. And he and I had talked about encounters of bits and pieces. And it was kind of difficult. You couldn't talk about that 30 years ago or 31 years ago now.
No.
You know, I actually started looking for pictures of it because I was trying to figure out what a woodbugger was. And I went back in that day. I don't think I even had a cell phone, but well, I know I didn't. I had one probably like 95 before I had my first cell phone. I went to the library, to a couple of different libraries, and I finally found several books that had pictures of different type Bigfoots. And I looked through the pictures, and there were like 10 different types they had pictures of. And this one was the second picture. It was called the number 2 picture, woodbugger.
Oh my God.
Mostly found in the south area. And
wow.
I thought that's exactly what I've seen. It looked almost identical to the creature. All it showed was the head, except the eyes were black. They weren't red like this one was. But
oh my God!
That was it. That was the picture. And
oh my God!
I actually tried to get my friend Linda Wood, who is in our group. She does AI, and she's the only really AI person I allow in the group because she doesn't claim any of them to be real. She just tries to make pictures that look real.
Yeah, and she's the one that did the photo that we used on the app.
Correct. That's exactly right.
That looked like this creature. I mean,
yeah, it looked pretty similar to it. Yeah, and actually, she sent me another one since then that's even closer. But I didn't get time to send that one to you just yesterday. But
I mean, this is.
That was.
Yeah, go ahead.
That was pretty much my first encounter, you know, and it took me, I had nightmares for, oh my gosh, for nights. I had nightmares and weeks into years, and I didn't go into the woods or hunt in the woods for at least 7 years.
Oh my God.
What hunting I did do, I did go back to my grandfather's farm a couple of years after that. My friends hunted, but I didn't. I went and stayed in the house with my grandfather. I didn't hunt. And they hunted. And they asked me, why aren't you hunting? I said, well, I just don't have an interest in deer hunting anymore. And, you know, just hung out with them until the nighttime come, and then I'd go spend the night in the house with my grandfather.
Yeah,
so,
well, you know, I got to say that this story is really scary. I actually have talked to a lot of Bigfoot people, and I haven't heard anything like this at all, or heard of a woodburger, but these things sound really scary. And, you know, the other experiences I've talked to people, it doesn't even resemble this thing that you saw at all. And so I mean, I appreciate you coming on and telling this story. I mean, just in case someone else, you know, comes along one of these weird woodburger things. But I know I know on our next, because we can only do so long, that we're going to be talking about a different part of this, which is yet another story that people are going to definitely want to see, because you saw these orbs and then you were terrorized by this thing. So we're going to cut it off, and I'm going to say thank you.
No, I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me, Zoe. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for being on the show, and you're going to be on the next one, number 2. So we'll see you then. Thanks, Darrell.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Thanks, everybody, for watching.